So next one is going to be talking about time. So time is really important because establishing that time can really give a sense of player or a viewer an idea of what year they're in or what kind of range of years they're in. So even just sometimes the spelling it out is really simple, but it doesn't always have to be spelled out. Sometimes we can take context clues from how people are dressed, the kind of props and things we see around the scene as to what time period it is, the quality of those assets and things of that nature. So you can see here we have this like a lot of like kind of retro vibe to all this stuff. We get an idea from the typography, you get an idea from the color grading. We also get an idea from the clothes that the characters are wearing and all the props in the scene. And then I sometimes really like the kind of subtle clues as to spelling instead of spelling out things. So we can actually establish time on this scene based on one thing, and that's the price of the gas. So by saying the price of the gas and knowing what context, how much gas costs per every given year that you're fueling your car, you can kind of get an estimate as to what year range we're in. So if you know that gas was like 5 years ago a certain price, and that's the kind of price that sign is showing, you can get an idea that this has probably been an abandoned space for some time.
Definitely looks like California prices.
Definitely.
For sure.
And the same goes for this. Like, even though this space could technically be, downtown Tokyo or something, somewhere where there's a lot of neon and stuff like that, just from our context of understanding what game spaces generally try to tell us, we can see from a lot of the little like nuances in the scene, like the light up sidewalk and all that kind of stuff, that this is definitely farther in the future than just somewhere that's in present day. So yeah, so this scene is a scene from God of War. So again, it doesn't have to be based in real world for you to understand what kind of time period it is. So we can establish from just seeing the props and the assets in the scene that it's an ancient period. It doesn't have to be a realistic period. It doesn't have to be one based in our reality. It can be something that is just based on the context of understanding the props and how things are made themselves. And here's a scene that I had created a while back, which is essentially established in the 1970s. So not only does the actual assets in the scene that are all built within that time period, but also the color grading kind of leans into that kind of time period of the 1970s. Another shot from that scene as well.
Man, that rotary phone, I actually remember. I'm old, I'm probably a little bit older than you, Clinton, on this front, but yeah, I've used those rotary phones for sure.
I definitely remember those. Yeah, my mom and grandmother both had one for a long time.
Wow, the fan too is really prototypical.
So yeah, so the next thing in general context of this is also make and model. So like just like you were talking about, the rotary phone, those fans, all thinking about how that kind of plays context into what year you're trying to sell as to what time period it is, because that can play a big part. A lot of times environment artists, when they're first starting out and they're not really quite thinking about all those parts of the process, they'll think, oh, I'll make this thing that's made out of metal and it does this. And it's like, oh, that metal wasn't even around at that point, or they weren't even using that type of thing to make that kind of asset at that time. So you always have to be aware of the context of the asset. And actually, a lot of times you'll find that you're learning way more about how things were constructed during like different time periods. And that's just part of the research of being a good environment artist and telling a compelling story. Mm-hmm. And here's a set from Decagon that we released, and it's essentially just all assets from the kind of Art Deco period. And you can see they all have a consistent look. They all have a feeling of that Art Deco time. The same here as well.
Yeah, that's why I'm a big fan of art history for artists in general. I mean, I never used to understand when I was in school the purpose of art history, but the purpose of art history is so that you can be a multilingual artist. And if you don't know what Art Deco looks like, you're going to have to research it and be acquainted with some of that. So I think it's great to see that.
Definitely. I totally agree. I think a lot of times when you at first you're kind of examining those things, you kind of take it for granted. And then years later, you realize how much more collective knowledge and understanding you have of those different time periods and how to convey those messages visually. So yeah, next is history and passage of time. So this is just basically talking about like what's happened here over the course of its years, like how old is it, like those kind of things. So you can really tell a story with just even one asset. So this is one of my favorite assets from Decagon that is just really telling a really compelling story in that you can see the wear, you can see the damage, you can see the years of use this thing has had. And I think those kind of things really tell a story where you have like, if you had a scene that was completely clean, was never been touched, it wouldn't be very realistic because like generally everything at some point has had some kind of wear or tear or usage. And so showing that through your actual assets and through your environment can really tell a great story.